Hi everyone. It's 12:05 p.m. here in New Zealand, and that means it's time to start the session. And what better way to start the session than with a story? This is the story of a young boy named Matthew. Matthew lived with his parents and had a lot to learn from what life had to offer. One day, Matthew's parents thought it would be a great idea to give their son a fine dining experience, as until that point, Matthew only ate in the comfort of his home or local outlets. Their idea worked wonders. Fast forward a few decades, Matthew was now happily married with a lovely daughter named Kara. Matthew discussed with his wife that it would be a great idea for Kara to experience fine dining just like the way he did when he was younger. They agreed and soon made the outing. Since Matthew himself doesn't fine dine often, he was feeling a little bit out of place. That, with the added pressure of giving Kara an experience that she will hopefully cherish and also learn from, left him with a feeling of not knowing what to really do. That's when he tried to recall his experience as a young kid in a restaurant and how his parents efficiently managed the situation. He asked himself, what would they do? That was the turning point. Matthew now had a blueprint of what was expected of him. Suddenly, he was comfortable being in an unfamiliar place. At the end of the evening, Kara had a good time dining at the restaurant and also learned a lot of new etiquette. Now, let's bring the story closer to home. Just like Matthew, haven't we all been in situations where we didn't have a frame of reference? Yet, haven't we all wanted to do our very best in these situations? Now, how many of us have asked this question before? What would they do? So, how does this work? Let me summarize this framework for you. Step number one is finding a needle in a haystack. Take your time to find a suitable role model. Ask yourself what traits are you looking for in your role model and what you'd want to learn from them. Now, this is a crucial step, so you must take your time with this. Step number two is to observe, absorb, and learn. Once you have found someone you can look up to, try and observe how they work. The differentiator between them and others wouldn't necessarily be the big wins, but instead, it'll be the many small things they do along the way. If you work closely with them, that's great. You'll get a front row seat to all the action. If not, ask them if they'd be open to mentoring you or even letting you shadow them every now and then. You'll be amazed by how many doors can be opened by just asking. Step number three, time to level up. With all that knowledge in hand, it's now time to put it to use. Next time you're in an unfamiliar situation, ask yourself this question: what would they do? This will help you see things from a different perspective. If you're afraid of doing the right thing when the situation is unfavorable, maybe approaching it the way your role model would might give you the courage of doing the right thing no matter what. Perhaps biases or personal conflicts are getting in the way, and looking at things from another perspective helps bring objectivity to the scene. Maybe producing an artifact to a certain benchmark was good enough for you in the past. But you know, your role model would go the extra mile in this instance and deliver something even better, resulting in you reaching for the stars. By aiming for a higher benchmark, you'll slowly see yourself level up in the process. And step number 4, take your training wheels off and see yourself grow. Once you're comfortable at this new baseline, take off the training wheels. From this point onward, you might not need to ask yourself this question because you'll already be ready to function at a higher level. For a while, you might stumble a bit, and that's natural. But very soon, you'll be absolutely comfortable on your own. Think about the time you learned how to ride a bicycle. Once the training wheels were taken off, you might have wobbled and may have even fallen down a couple of times. However, eventually you would have been able to find that balance and ride the bicycle perfectly fine. Do not forget to reflect back regularly to see your progress, the situations you have handled by yourself that you're proud of, and just appreciate the incredible efforts you have put in. Also, this isn't a one off process. You can repeat the steps in this framework anytime you're in a new role, at any point in your career, or when you find yourself in an unfamiliar situation. Perhaps one day you might be a role model for someone else. Okay, so let's conclude this session with a quick recap. Step number 1 was finding a needle in a haystack, i.e., finding a role model. Step number 2 was to observe, absorb, and learn. Step number 3 was to level up. Time to level up. Ask yourself the question, what would they do? And finally, step number 4 is to take your training wheels off and see yourself grow. That's it for this session, everyone. I'm Clyde D'Souza. Thanks for listening. Q&A will now be open for the remainder of the session, so feel free to post your questions in this chat. In the meantime, I have created a Miro template that captures the gist of this session and can also be used as your personal workbook. I'll try and paste the link to this in this chat, but we'll also post it on Twitter. Thank you. All right, so we have a question. How did you find your role model? I've previously found my role model because I was working with that person pretty close. And so I've actually followed this framework quite organically without actually calling it a framework. And then obviously once it worked, I sort of theorized it. I created the steps so that it is so that I can publish this and I can help others with this framework as well. But yeah, my previous role model, I've actually found he was working with me in the previous company. All right, feel free to post any questions. I'll be sticking around for a few more minutes and happy to answer any questions. How did you take your training wheels off? Trevor, I think it's up to, I think that's quite subjective. It is, it's when you feel that you're ready. I think that's pretty much the time, you can take your training wheels off. What I found myself is that when I switched jobs, I think that forced me to take the training wheels off because in the previous instance, I actually was going through the whole exercise of like, what would they do? And then, once once I switched the job, I was comfortable in the new place. I was like, yeah, I think this is a good time to say, let me stop asking myself this question. I think I've leveled up to a certain degree, and I think it is time to take the training wheels off. So I think there's no fixed time limit. I can't say that there's a year or 2 years for everybody it'll apply. I think it's quite subjective. But for me, yeah, I think once I felt I was comfortable in the new place, I just decided to take the training wheels off. Terry, yes, I did already present the session, but I think you can catch the recording of this. I think the content was pretty short, about 7 to 9 minutes, which we covered and wrapped up by 12:15, I think. But I think you should be able to access the recording for this session and every other session in Medium Day. I was wondering who your role models were and how they inspired you, but I'll check that out. Yeah, actually, that was one of the questions that was asked before, and actually, because this is sort of like a work-related thing. I was just telling someone else before that I found my role model at work in my previous workplace, and because I just worked with this person quite closely, and you could find a role model anyway. It depends on what. It could be someone who you work with closely, or maybe someone who you just admire from far, but they might still be in the same profession as you. And yeah, that's pretty much what I actually covered, and then how to proceed with that. Oh, that's an interesting question. Do you think it's more important to work at an inspiring job or work with inspiring people? I think it would be fortunate for both to be true, but in some cases both can't be true. But then I hope that individually at least it is true. So I hope everyone actually on this call, and everyone else as well, they get to experience both, even if it be individually. Because sometimes working at an inspiring job is beneficial. Is really valuable, because you might be at your point in career where you do want to level up, you do want to learn something new, you do want to excel in some place, and that's maybe that time working at an inspiring job might be the right fit for you. Or maybe sometimes working with inspiring people might be right for you. So I think it is again very subjective, and it depends on what you're looking for at that stage of your career, stage of your life. Maybe you might have some different priorities in life that might not even be work related, and depending on that, your answer to this might change. So I think it is subjective, and it is what's really best suited for you, but suited for you at that point of time. There's another question. Can you talk a little bit about your book, writing about engineering and then writing a children's book? Well, those seem like very different topics. I'd love to hear about what inspired you. Yeah, that's right, Brittany. Writing about engineering on Medium, it seems quite natural, and just an extension of what I do on a day-to-day basis. But and a little bit more actually about what I do on a day-to-day basis, because I like to play around with new technology, new tools, and also like writing in general. I actually love to document, and so I do spend a lot of time writing and trying out new things. So I think writing an engineering guide, or an article actually seems very very natural to me. But I did want to challenge myself, and I was like, at some point I do need to write a book, and that's when I got into this whole self-publishing journey, and writing for Kindle, or for even other platforms. And I was researching on the various topics, various genres, and who my audience might be. And I think the the stories that I had in mind were, I think, best suited for children, because I think that is the right time to, uh, given the nature of the stories. I think that was the right time where you could tell them a story, of a completely fictional one, but also inspire them, and hope they learn from the story. And in terms of writing, I think, based on where my capacity was and capability was, I think writing a children's bedtime storybook was the right place to enter. So I think, that was really the thinking around it. In terms of writing the children's storybook, the first one, which was Mama Tell Me a Story, the whole idea of that was to not give the children directly a message. So don't have a moral of the story at the bottom of each story, but just tell the story. So if it talks about Daisy fighting her fears, in the form of in the form of a story, that's about it. That's the story. And I'm hoping that children will read that, and rather than saying, oh, here's the moral of the story at the end, they'd be like, I want to become like Daisy. And just like how Daisy overcome came her fears of either darkness or for monsters, I can also overcome my fears of darkness or something else. So it's like an indirect approach of writing. So yeah, if anyone's interested, do check it out. Mama Tell Me a Story. And then there's a second one as well, which is called AI Tell Me a Story, but that's a whole different story behind that. Awesome. It looks like we are over time by 1 minute, which means, yeah, thanks for attending, everybody. I think I've dropped a few links before, um, to the Medium profile, to the Miro board, which you can use as your personal workbook, and of course the recording for this session will also be available later. So if you have joined in late, feel free to check out the recording, and of course if you need a recap, you have the recording as well. So thank you so much for attending. I'll just drop a couple of more notes and links in the chat. Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a lovely night, a lovely evening, wherever you are in the world, and have a lovely weekend as well. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. See ya.